Hi everyone, this video is to show you how to color the site in using Photoshop, but before we can do that we need to export the site out. So I'm just going to turn the grid off there for clarity, and first thing I thought would be a good idea to include would be some of the blocks, or a car at least anyway. So I flipped over to the other drawing. If you want to do this, you will need to download the drawing and use the Control C key to copy it over like so. And I'm going to rotate that round by 90 degrees. The blocks file is on the module area on Blackboard, so hopefully you can find that okay. Now I'm going to use the copy tool just to copy a few instances of the car around the site. Put one in there. Doesn't overly matter just where all of these go as such, but just to help populate the drawing a little bit as such. Okay, and then I'm going to rotate that by 180 degrees. Select that one as well, just because it's unlikely in reality they would all be the same way around. Okay, that'll do for now. And if we double click with the middle mouse button, that takes us to the full extent. Okay, so with the full site showing, we are in model space at this point in time, so we will need to go over to layout. And when we go to layout, we're going to set this up for printing. So at the moment it just comes up with a default sort of printable area, and if we go to the output tab, we can choose the page setup manager and click on modify. So currently we're on layout 1, modify. So if we choose a number of properties here, first of all we can choose the high quality print AutoCAD PDF plotter, and then we want to use an A3 page. It'll be a little bit large for this example, but when it comes to your final site layout along with some of the context of the streets and buildings around, you will need it to be A3. So what to plot? Basically there are a few options there. Layout will plot what is on the white area, which represents the page size. And then finally here we need to have a plot style table. Now for you guys it won't have anything relating to this module. I've been tinkering around, so you can see I've got a BEN123 and a BEN123A. I'm going to click new and start from scratch with creating a new plot style table. Go to next, and I'm going to call it BEN123B. You don't need to add the B in your case. Click next, and we can modify the plot style editor here. It'll help save it before we finish. And if you click on color 1 and then hold down the shift key and click on color 9, that'll select all of those 9 colors. And then for the color we want those all to print out black, and then the other layers we want them to print as per the layer color. So particularly color 10 is of interest to us at this point in time. We need the site boundary to print out as red, so using the object color will be fine. So save and close, and then finish, and then OK at this point, and then close. So now it has given us a slightly bigger page area for an A3 page rather than A4. And if we click on those corners of the rectangle there, that will allow us to resize the viewport. So we can zoom in just to the corner to make it as accurate as possible. Now at this stage it's pretty much filling the printable area. The dashed line is the extent of the printable area here for this particular plotter, which is a PDF plotter. And we then want to select the viewport and go to properties. You may need to right click and go to properties. I have it showing here. So we want a scale of 1 to 500. And if you divide 1 by 500, you will get a fraction of 0.002. So if we type in here 0.002, that will give us a 1:500 scale. Bearing in mind that for your site, as I said, you will have roads and buildings all around that. We want the site to be in the middle of the site. So if we double click inside the viewport, we can then move and pan around so that the site is in the middle of the plot or the middle of the page, and we can see the rest of the context okay. Now, just at this point to note, I made a little mistake with the page setup manager, so if we go back in and modify that, you need to click on the display plot styles, and if we click preview at this point, that will show us the way the lines are. Okay, so there's one of the layers there is maybe incorrectly showing, so I'm going to go back to layer properties and just choose a different color. Click OK. It's good just to double check all of these things in case any of you have mistakes also. So we've just changed that to a normal green rather than the 90, which may have tagged over from some of the AutoCAD coloring I did. Now if we type here regen all, that should have worked but didn't. So let's see if we go back to output, page setup manager, modify, display, plot styles. Okay, right, I mustn't have saved it the previous time. So the red line is now showing, but all of the other lines are black. So at this stage we are now ready to plot. So if we click on the plotter, we only want to plot a single sheet, so the bottom option is fine. And then just preview is always good to do for peace of mind, and then right click and go to plot. We can save this, so I'm going to call it site layout example part C at this stage and click save. It may, depending on the way your drawing is set up or your computer is set up, it may open it up just in Adobe Reader, which is fine for preview, but I can close that down now, and that's us finished using AutoCAD. We can close the wee bubble there, and we'll move over to Photoshop next. Now we're in Photoshop, so if we go to open and find the file that we have just saved, so I've temporarily saved it to the desktop, click open, and don't open it too quickly, just be sure that you check all of the options here. So what we want to make sure is we don't trim it in an inappropriate way. If you maybe use bounding box, that could limit it to the drawing area. We want to use the option here called trim box, which means that it will come out correctly at the scale of 1:500. We also need to make sure that the resolution is 300 pixels per inch. And other than that, everything should be okay. So this is the file opened up as such in Photoshop, and Photoshop can be quite fun. Hopefully not too difficult to work out how to do various things in it. The first thing to notice is that we have some layers down here. We also have some colors depending on the way Photoshop opens up for you. It may or may not show exactly the way I have it. You may need to tinker around with some of the little claps and expand arrows just to have it showing. We don't really need this history one at the moment, although if you do something by mistake and then need to fix it later, the history one can be useful. There are a bank of various tools down the side here which may or may not show exactly the way I have them because yeah, for example, the gradient tool may be the one that naturally shows. We will need the paint bucket tool later. So let's do a few things to the actual drawing itself. The first thing we want to do is create a new layer. So the icon for that is down here. And if we drag that layer down to the bottom and call this background, just double clicked on it there. And then the layer that the drawing is on is hopefully this layer 1. So if we click on the little eye symbol, it will make that invisible and visible. So that is the correct layer. We're going to call that AutoCAD drawing. Okay, and the next thing I want to do there is just with both of those layers, I want to lock them because we don't want to, no actually, we want to lock the AutoCAD drawing, but the background not just yet. So as I said earlier, the gradient tool may be showing as default there, but if you hold down on the tool, you should then be able to click on the paint bucket tool. And with the background layer selected, you always need to make sure you select the correct layer when you're doing things. So with that selected, click on the black area of the color swatches over here. And we want to choose white, so just drag right up onto the top left hand corner there, like so. Click OK, and then once we've that done, that will put it in a white background there. So now that we have that the way we want it, we can lock that layer. We want to add various layers as we add the colors, so you want to make sure that you're not adding things to incorrect layers. We'll use a layer for the house, we'll use a layer for the road, for the footpath, different layers for those two. We'll use one for the grass, another one for the trees, another one for the car. So let's start off with the road. Hit enter once we've named that, and we want to use a tool up here. Whether it's showing correctly or not, you need to click on the third icon down. It may automatically show selection brush tool for you, but we want to use the polygonal lasso tool. And within your drawing, once you've selected that, you may need to zoom in or zoom out. So if you press Control and plus and use your mouse to sort of pan around and so on, or use the slider bars, we are going to try coloring the road. So let's zoom in once more and start over here. I click there for the first point, click here, and then we want to go round strategically short enough areas just to do this. Now you may wonder why I'm doing this rather than using the paint bucket tool. It's because we have the potential for jagged edges on corners, so accuracy is much better so that we don't end up with any accidental white strips here and there on the drawing. So it's always better to overlap with the colors to do it more accurately. I guess if you're in a hurry, it is possible to use the paint bucket tool, but the results are not always as good if you do that. So it does take a little bit of extra time to do it more accurately like this, but it is worth it. And now at this point, if we just double click, that will finish off the area for us. Now you do need to be careful here that you choose the paint bucket tool before you choose the color. Otherwise it might deselect. Although deselecting is not the worst thing in the world, it can always be fixed afterwards. So let's try that. That's maybe a little bit dark, is it? Okay, so I'm happy with that color. And then now if we press Control and D, that will deselect that. For the footpath then, I'm not necessarily going to color all of the footpath areas, but let's create another layer and call it footpath. Oops, I accidentally hit the wrong thing there. So for the footpath, F-O-T-P-H, right. Footpath, and we go back to the polygonal lasso tool. You can hold down the shift key if you're drawing straight lines. That'll keep it nice and straight for you. Okay, I'll zoom in just slightly more for these curves. Just overlapping again with the black line correctly. I'll just scroll on up to the top here. Actually, it needs to step in slightly, just with the way my drawing is, unfortunately. Again, you can use the shift tool if you wish to keep these lines straight. my toolbar, Windows toolbar is popping up there when I hover down at the bottom of the screen. So let's just keep this going till we get it finished. Double click there. And again, remember to click on the paint bucket tool. What happens if you don't click on the paint bucket tool and you do this? And then you do that, is it will deselect. So what you can go back up and do is undo deselect. Just if you happen to make that mistake, it'll reselect rather than deselecting. Let's try a slightly lighter color. Okay, I'm happy with that. I can deselect now because I want to. So that's filled in some of the footpath areas there as such. And if we go to the magnifying glass and fit on screen, that'll show us what has happened to the site so far. Now, yeah, maybe just for a little bit of consistency there, I'll color in some of the footpath, but not all. Just on the opposite side of the road. I may not want to do all of it, but let's use the rectangle selection tool if I get it to work properly. To get down past the driveway of plot 4 at least here for now. And we can color that in. Okay. So what we want to do next is the house. So we can create another layer, call it house. That layer is current, so that should be fine. Let's again use that rectangle tool, but zoom in slightly. So rectangle selection. And in terms of colors, you may need to expand and find different colors up here. I'm going to use the pastel tool set and use the paint bucket tool just to fill in there. We can color in a number of these as we go along. Scrolling up as we go. I don't think I need to do all of them, but we'll do 3 anyway, just for demonstration purposes. You can see that that's sort of automatically lining up with what had been done a moment ago. So we can see that a number of the houses have been colored in. I'm not doing all of them. You by all means can do that for completeness. Let's move on to the grass area then. So let's see, we'll add another layer, call it grass. Make sure again you're on the correct layer. We'll use the polygonal lasso tool, and I think we want to zoom in one more time and just move so we can see this grass area correctly. So let's select that as accurate as we can. Just clicking a number of times to get the curvature of the radius there. And yeah, let's try this one, and again use the paint bucket tool like so. Okay. I mean, we could go round and do more. Let's do one more just for consistency for this site at least. Although for ease you can include more than one plot whenever they're adjacent like that. I forget where I started, so let's just make sure I complete. Yeah, I did start at the top. Okay. So again, we can use the paint bucket tool and fill that in and deselect. Let's also do the drive area at this point. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll just call it drive way, although it is driveway path combined as such. Polygonal lasso tool for that. So we'll just follow around holding the shift key to try and keep it nice and straight, making sure we overlap the black lines sufficiently. so there's no gaps anywhere at the end. Double clicking there again just to complete rather than having to trace the whole way back. Let's see, what color will we use? We'll try sort of a grey blue color maybe. Try that one, see what it looks like. Try that instead. Don't know. First one will be slightly better, I think. We don't want it to look like water anyway. Now, we've coloured in the main parts of plot 4, at least in this case. And what we then need to do is make sure that we colour in the car and the tree, and that'll probably be enough for the demo video. So let's have another layer and call it tree, or trees. Okay. And in this instance, we want to have a different color, I guess. So maybe a darker color. But before we do that, we need to select what we want to draw, or the area that we want to use. I'm going to try the magnetic lasso tool this time, and I'm going to zoom in just to one of the trees. It may or may not work terribly well here with this. So yeah, sometimes you might need to click manually. Yeah, to be honest, the magnetic lasso tool can be a little bit temperamental sometimes, but for tree, I guess it doesn't overly matter because we're overlaying the color. Now, one thing that you do need to make sure is that with a tree layer on top of grass, the order of the layers will be as you see them on the screen there. So if your tree layer happened to be below the grass, and then we use the fill and this color here, you will not actually see anything on your screen to represent that. But if you drag the layer up, that will show you where the tree layer now is. So let's go on lighter instead of darker. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't overly matter, but let's leave it at that one for now, I suppose. Now, if you have a number of trees, you may wish to then copy this layer and move them around rather than having to color each thing individually. If you've got a complicated shape or circular shape in this example, if we click on the trees layer and Control and C and Control and V, it will create a new layer called 1. So if we again make sure that is above the layer that we're on and go to the magnifying glass, we can zoom out slightly, zoom back in again. And if we click on that layer and use this move tool, that will allow us to move the item from that layer to another spot on your drawing. So I'm going to zoom in and try to move that accurately. Now, bearing in mind that it will copy everything on the layer, so if you had 2 or 3 trees colored manually and then you tried to move it, it would give you, or tried to copy it, it would give you those 2 or 3 trees. In this case, it was just one item, but that's one quicker way of maybe doing some of this. So let's try and merge down. That should have added those both to the trees layer. Yep, so if we hide it and make it visible again, that's worked okay. Final thing then is to color in one of the cars, so we'll do that now. Just make it large enough on the screen so that we can see it. And again, we create a new layer, call it cars. You can sort of copy them and merge down in a similar way at a later point in time. You might want to use different colors for different cars, but I'm only going to do one example here. So for this, we're going to use the polygonal lasso tool, the normal one. And we'll just start at this sort of corner here. It has come out very pixelated, unfortunately, in terms of the car. So it's not massively accurate at this point in time. I do know sometimes people like to get a thinner version of a car, and then they can go into the accuracy of whether a window is a different color to the bodywork of the car, for example, but let's not overly worry about that. Let's go for a good strong color. So I'm going to close the pastel palette folder and go to RGB. Right, so let's use red. Click on the paint bucket tool and fill that in. Now, bearing in mind that the car's there is actually below the driveway, I've made my mistake that I mentioned a moment ago on my own. So there we go. At this stage, that should be enough to allow you to go through the process of coloring everything. It just takes a little bit of time. The only outstanding piece of information is the copyright text that we need for your OSNI map. It doesn't apply to this example, but let's just find the text tool. I had it up earlier. There it is. So text tool here. I'm going to type in some information. You can copy and paste it in. So OSNI map license text. We'll add that in for now. You need to copy in the exact text. So at this stage, that text is probably a bit big. So we'll select all and choose size 12. Yeah, that looks okay. And once we have that, then we can move that to an appropriate place on the drawing. And you can do the same with your title block information and things like that. Although if it is on a poster, you'll have title information on the poster as such. So it's probably best just to put that text up there. I really think it should be black as well. So let's change the color. And there we go. So that should be it in terms of creating what you need at this point in time. Hopefully you've enjoyed using Photoshop.